Greetings and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Run, and today we're playing as Maggie. I don't know what the fascination with Maggie and Mom's Food Dailies is, but it does seem that every time we play as Maggie we have a Mom's Food Daily, and it really depends. If it's a good daily, it just ends on Mom's Food and you don't have a way to go forward, but if it's a really bad daily, then somehow you find all the seams and you're just forced to play through that slog that is usually the Maggie Daily. And Maggie Daily, I'm not really gonna go into it, but she does suffer a lot from just not having enough speed and having too much health. And I'm not really sure what it is. I feel like if Maggie even had just 3 health and Yum Heart, I feel like I would feel better about the character, but something about that 4 health just kinda irks me. And what gets even worse is I feel like whenever I have too much health on my hands, I feel like I'm actually weaker than I realistically am, and just makes me feel like I'm in a much worse position than maybe what is objectively true. And stem cells doesn't help that case. I'm not really sure why. Maybe I'm too sentimental of a person, but a lot of the items that I pick up have sort of an emotional value, or at least elicit an emotional response in me. And stem cells is a very negative one. If I could skip it, I would, but I know objectively it's just a good item. It gives you shot speed, which increases your range. It makes it so that your tears actually go to the enemy faster, which you think would be a good thing. And also it gives you an HP upgrade, which is never a bad thing, especially if you already have 4 health. So why do I have this feeling? I'm not really sure. I've explored it and kind of thought about it a little bit, and I think the majority of that just comes from the original game. And here's a little bit of an interesting tidbit from history. And in the original game, we had some shot speed upgrades, or at least items which increased your shot speed. I think one of those was Cat of Nine Tails, and the other one was the stem cells. And obviously both of these items actually weren't that good in the original game, and the main reason for that was the shot speed, or at least with how the game worked, the tick rate of the logic, so to say, was lower than it is right now. Now the game runs at 60 frames per second. I think the game logic ticks, collisions checks, and things like that run at 30 frames per second, so it's not exactly every frame. But in the original game, because the game lagged a lot, it was possible that you reached even lower frames of that tickage, and which means if your shot speed was too high, what could end up happening is sometimes your tears would fly over the enemies, or maybe what happened a bit more frequently is your shots would phase through the enemy and actually hit them in backwards, even though we were shooting them from the front, or something like that. I'm not really sure if that's exactly how it happened, but I do remember the high shot speed being very detrimental to your health, because it had some unpredictable effects on the engine, and sometimes it would just end up missing, and it's a huge bummer. And obviously for that reason, items like Cat of Nine Tails, which didn't have a damage up back in the day, if you can believe that, just weren't worth being picked up because of how bad they were. So it does feel this nagging feeling in my gut that I shouldn't pick up stem cells just because of what it entails. But obviously in Rebirth, all of those shortcomings have been fixed. Now the engine actually runs and works, and there's no detriment to having a high shot speed. I guess the only thing I could point out is that velocity and physics of the game, so-called, are very important, especially once you get used to them. And it's really important that you feel right if you want to be effective at disposing of enemies. And I feel like velocity, that just comes from your tears, and obviously the velocity is affected by both your shot speed and your tear delay to some extent, and also your movement, so how fast you're going. And being a character which doesn't have a lot of speed but does have a lot of shot speed, or at least an above average amount of shot speed, puts me in a position where I am really bad at aiming shots. And I think this is very apparent when I have to kill enemies that move a lot, and I just can't land it for some reason. Especially it's problematic with something like bonies. And bonies are, I feel like a very difficult challenge, because not only do they shoot at you very fast, but it takes 5 hits to kill them, because we don't have a lot of damage, but also because of how they move kind of unpredictably and randomly, it's hard to predict where they're going to be, which means they end up missing more shots than usual. So I'm just left in a position where I really can't dispose of them effectively or in a fast manner. So it's one of those things which I feel like, even though it's one item and it's an objectively good one, it just messes with me so much that maybe it's worth just not picking up in the first place. And in this case, I don't think it would have made too much of a difference, because obviously 1 health more or less in this position wouldn't change the outcome of the game or the run or anything. I wasn't more likely to get an IV bag, or maybe even the blood bag from the blood bag machine, or whatever. So, you know, maybe in some niche cases, but in this particular one, I feel like maybe I would have been better by not picking it up. And I know that sounds very unreasonable because just of how good the item is in the first place, but yeah, sentimental values and emotional responses. Humans are kind of weird when you think about it. But later on, okay, so we did start out in kind of a weird bad direction, and stem cells didn't help that cause. Later on, we did get 2 pretty good items, which is Jacob's Ladder and Capricorn. Both of those items work really well together, because not only do you get a small speed upgrade and a stats upgrade, you also get Jacob's Ladder, which just helps you get a little bit of extra DPS. But what happened later was something that really kind of threw me off guard. So we were playing on an XL floor, which is already kind of bad in some sense, but it's really good if you're kind of running low on time. The problem was that I didn't realize it at first, and I took some red card damage, kind of unbeknownst to me. I ran into some enemies which I really shouldn't have, and they dealt 1 full heart of damage instead of the half I was expecting, so I wasn't really kind of checking my health too diligently. So I did get hit again, and I did take red heart damage, which means I kind of lose the devil deal chance for 2 floors and not just 1, because it's an XL floor. So what I try to do in that situation, obviously, try to visit as many item rooms as possible, go to both bosses, to hope to get a devil deal in the end and maybe blow up some beggars or whatever to increase your chances. But what ended up happening is I found a pill, I used it, and it was a telepills which teleported me to the I am error room. And that's really problematic, because the telepills and its outcome is actually not seeded, which means that I'm one of the rare people which is gonna get teleported to the I am error room. So if there were any good items in that devil deal or maybe those boss rooms, I'm not just gonna see them anymore, and this means I'm already left in a much worse position than a lot of the other people who are playing the daily. So that's kind of a bummer, and I realized that, and I knew that I had to change my course of plan. So how do I do that? Of course, by being risky, trying to take items and make things work, which usually wouldn't work. And of course, the next item that I found was soy milk. Soy milk. And you know how bad soy milk is, and it always tricks me, because I always feel like theoretically I have Jacob's Ladder, I have soy milk. Maybe it'll just result in a really overpowered combo which will be able to deal a ton of damage and just kill every single enemy in the room. It makes sense, right? Because every time your shot lands, it also deals more damage with the laser, and the laser of course stacks with your damage, I think, but that's not really that problematic because you're shooting them so fast, so what can go wrong? But it turns out that soy milk and Jacob's Ladder actually is not that good of a synergy. It always gets me, I swear to God, soy milk always gets me. I always feel like it's supposed to be better than it actually is, but then it's just worse, and it just breaks the game in some way, and I'm really not excited for soy milk anymore. I feel like I always say this, but I'm never gonna pick up this item again, just unless it's a very niche case scenario. If I have Holy Light, piercing shots, and maybe a lump of coal, all of those 3 items, and like a really high tier delay, then maybe in that case soy milk would be worth it, because that would increase our DPS. But in a lot of the other cases, it's just so detrimental that I can't recommend it. And what ended up happening later on, of course I had soy milk, I was already kind of distressed, kind of disappointed in myself for picking it up, thinking that it would be any different. So I went into the angel deal, of course I beat the boss, and there was a troll bomb spawned behind the statue, and that's just one of the permutations of the room that the angel deals can have, and sometimes the troll bomb spawns right next to the statue, and it's a holy water, so I was like, are you kidding me, you know, you're giving me holy water on a run like this? That's just kinda cruel. So I figured, should I fight the angel statue? Shouldn't I? Maybe my damage is not that bad against enemies if I just can constantly shoot at them, but the troll bomb exploded before I had the chance to think and react, and I ended up fighting an angel statue, which was the second one, so I think Gabriel or Uriel, I'm not sure which one of those, but essentially the one which has more HP, and only then did I realize just how bad my damage was, and I just wasn't able to get to him. I just was shooting at him for like 3 minutes straight, and he was almost dead, admittedly, but it really didn't help the cause. So I figured when I beat him, I was at like 19 minutes and was like, there's no way I'm gonna be catching boss rush. So I was hoping that there was a way for me maybe to go to the sacrifice room, go to the dark room, try to beat the lamb and whatnot, and that's exactly what happened. We found a secret room, one of the buttons actually contained a passage to the womb 1, and in there I found a sacrifice room which allowed me to go to the lamb. And of course in this case I used the teleporter to kind of teleport around as soon as I saw a room which I deemed was hard. So I came back in here, I'm trying to fight the lamb obviously, and you can see just how bad my damage is. I'm not doing anything, and the homing shots just got me. I'm not sure how you're supposed to dodge this. I know the theory, but if your shot speed is low, or I mean your speed is low, you really can't kind of maneuver, and we have no defensive options. I mean, we have the cube of meat, and using that would be, I think, a bit better in this situation, but I really felt like maybe if I try really hard and really try to stay away and use the whiz to its fullest advantage, I'm gonna be able to kill the lamb. And of course that didn't happen. I only got like halfway through, and I used like 15 bombs as well, so it didn't really turn out that well. But our rank, 161st, not too terrible, all admittedly, considering that we picked up the whiz, we picked up soy milk, and we still managed to get to the lamb. And even though we died and took like 6,000 points of damage penalty, we still managed to rank in a relatively good spot, top 7%, something like that, and that's really decent. I can't be too mad with that. At least I enjoyed it to some extent. I had fun, I would say, but really, don't pick up soy milk. If you take anything away from this video, then just don't pick up soy milk. It's just such a bad item. I feel like the damage multiplier that it gives you or that it takes away should be reduced or increased just so you wouldn't lose as much damage. It would really help the item, and it would make it so much more fun. And I guess we can do that with modding, and maybe I'll do something like that and buff soy milk a little bit. After all, I think it is a special item, so it does deserve to have some of that recognition. It seems like such a cool concept, but it just never works out. I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I hope to see you next time.